This is La Pizarra, a place where we explore creative minds in the entertainment industry on both sides of the mic and the camera. Here is your host, Nikki Mondellini.
Welcome to another episode of La Pizarra. I'm your host, Nikki Mondellini, and today we're talking about all things voiceover with the man who knows everything about the business. He is the person to follow if you want to know about the latest trends in voiceover and also the elements of an award-winning demo. And, of course, a lot more. His name is J. Michael Collins. But before we go into the interview, I want to remind you that all of the episodes of La Pizarra are available on lapizarrapodcast.com and also on nikkimondellini.com/La Pizarra, where you can also find the transcripts. And you can sign up for the newsletter, which is always in English and Spanish. It's our monthly newsletter. And I would like to also ask a small favor, and if you would give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, that would be amazing so that other people can find us. And your comments are always welcome on social media and on YouTube. With over 20 years as a professional voiceover artist, J. Michael Collins has worked with some of the biggest companies, brands, sports leagues, and organizations on the planet. He is a top-grossing talent in the online marketplace and has become recognized as an industry-leading talent coach and demo producer as well. J. Michael is a 50-time Voice Arts Awards winner as a voice actor, demo producer, scriptwriter, and casting director. And along with his wife and business partner, Anna, J. Michael is the producer of VoiceOver Atlanta, the industry's largest and longest-running conference. He is also a co-producer of the One Voice Conference USA and a gracious host to a small group of voice actors each year at luxurious venues in Europe for the signature JMC Euro VO retreats. And last but not least, he is also the host of the podcast This Week in VO. J. Michael, welcome to La Pizarra.
Thank you, Nikki. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very happy that you're here. And also, I want to say congratulations because we are recording this podcast in November, a day after the Voice Arts Award nominations have come out. And of course, you were nominated several times. So congratulations for that.
Well, thank you. And congratulations really due to my demo clients. It's mostly their work, and we're proud to see them recognized.
Yeah, I mean, and for sure, you know exactly all the elements that go into an award-winning demo. So, but before we go into that, I would like to just talk a little bit about your beginnings. So you grew up in Dallas, is that right?
Not really. I grew up kind of all over the place a little bit. I was born in Washington, D.C. Okay. We lived in Paris, France when I was a toddler. We moved from there to the Boston area, then to the New York area, and then back to Washington. And then it was only in high school that we moved to Dallas and finished my education there, went to university there, and then fairly promptly moved back to the D.C. area.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you are used to traveling around from a very early age. Because right now, I mean, you're going between countries. You have studios and I don't know in how many places. I mean, it's
just two, but it's
just two. Okay. But they are top of the art places. I mean, just amazing. But so what was your start in VO like?
I think I've told this story so many times now, but it's, I started in radio, and I always, when I was 12, I was running coffee for a couple of shock jocks, in the afternoons after school. And by the time I was 15, I had believe it or not, a business news, local economic news talk show, by which I say really just reading mostly reading copy off the Bloomberg Wire, and doing a couple of phone interviews. So it really wasn't that daunting, but by 15, I had my first radio show, and I wanted to be Howard Stern when I was a kid. I mean, my parents probably shouldn't have been letting me listen to him when I was 11 or 12, but
yeah, exactly.
It's part of my misspent youth. But I wanted to be a shock jock, and it didn't pan out that way. But what was interesting is that when I had that first radio experience, even though I wasn't being paid much for the actual radio program, I started to make money doing VO for sponsors on the station, doing commercials for sponsors on the station. And some pretty decent names. And before you knew it, I'm 15, 16 years old, making a couple couple $1,000s a month doing voiceover, and all of a sudden it said, well, all right, this could be a thing. So proceeded to continue to do that through my high school years and then through college. And by the time I graduated college, I was making a small but legitimate living doing VO, and actually passed up the chance to go to law school to see if this would continue to be a thing. And my family thought I was nuts, but it turned out all right.
And it actually did. But what was the turning point for you from having a job and making a decent living into like skyrocketing and really being one of the top industry leaders in voiceover? That's
a really good question, and I think that it sort of began with the shift in the industry to more of a DIY model back in the kind of mid 2000s. I mean, I always tell people the first 10 years of my career, I lived on a golf course. I made decent money, but not a fortune. But I worked 5 hours, 10 hours a week. And, those were the days you would go in and record auditions in studios or agency offices or for a casting director. And, I might audition for 10 or 15 things in a week and book a couple of them, and it was enough to pay the bills, right? And I thought it was a great life. Now, if I had known that we could go out and find so much work on our own at that time, I'd probably be retired right now. But I think the ascendancy to greater planes in my career began when we started to realize that we could actually go out and do some of this on our own. And don't get me wrong, we love our agents and we love our casting director friends and we love our managers and we love all the people who are involved in the process for us. But the evolution of the industry to something where talent can go out and find their own work is something that dramatically changed my career, and I think just changed the careers of and the trajectories of many other artists in the business.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it is a turning point, and it's something that we have to do because there's so much competition. I mean, for example, my agent in Houston, I remember when I started doing VO like that, just more seriously in 2007, there was not that much competition. I would book fairly consistently. We were doing a lot of e-learning, a lot for the oil industry, the medical industry, and I would go out to other studios, and that was the model, right? Then bit by bit, suddenly I didn't book as much, and I was like, well, what's going on? I was really wondering what the problem was. Then I started to find out that my agent was actually broadening, they were having a lot more people in the roster. So the level of competition was really heightened at that point. And then I learned from other agents or from other talent, you can have agents in several cities and you can do this and you can do that. But not until I saw that it was really up to me to start, getting serious about my website and about looking for work in my own clients, is that my business really started to go to another place, And speaking of that, I wanted to touch on something about conferences, because you, of course, are heading VO Atlanta with your wife, Anna. And
I'm following closely behind Anna is mostly how it works. But
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard she's like the most wonderful organizer and event producer, and she has a lot of experience in that. So we're very happy that now VO Atlanta is in both your hands and Anna's hands in that aspect. But I really can sense a difference between a before and after of going to conferences like VO Atlanta. For me, it was also a game changer. And this year, the Hispanic program, you're bringing that back because it wasn't there last year, correct? So
that's right.
What are some of the things? And it's been headed by Valentina Latina, who has also been on this podcast, and she's of course amazing.
Dynamite, force of nature.
she is really. I mean, she's great. What are some of the things that Hispanic talent have to look forward to when going to VO Atlanta in 2023? By the way, this program is being heard a little bit after that because it's part of season 7, which is being published in the spring. So, but of course, people can learn about all of this to sign up for the following year.
That's right. Well, Valentina's put together an absolutely tremendous program of content for us. And I think the thing that's going to be a little different about what we're doing compared to the way it's been run in the past when there has been a Spanish track is that we're integrating the Spanish language content essentially into the main conference. So it's not like they're all going to be stuck in one room and, and that's going to be the locus of everything. We are going to spread it out among the entire conference. It's part of the standard offering and the standard program. And we've got some great speakers and Spanish. It's Hernano Oruela is the keynote for the Spanish program. She's got Victoria Atkin, and just a really tremendous group of leaders within that part of the industry that we think represent the best of the best among the Latin American community in voiceover. And I think it was important to Anna and myself I know that the community, the Spanish-speaking community, had been maybe a little alienated by the way that certain things had happened in the past with VO Atlanta, and it was important to us to try to start on a new foot and to welcome everyone back in a way that allows them to be, a part of the main event, and to be respected and treated with the place that they deserve to be. And considering how much growth there is in Spanish language VO in the United States and elsewhere, and how important that community is just in terms of the population now in the United States. I mean, we want the voiceover industry to look more like America looks, right? And we need more Spanish representation. So we're glad to have Valentina in charge, and we think we put together some great content.
Well, yeah, I'm very happy to hear that, because I think Hispanic talent can definitely learn a lot from the conferences, not only for all the sessions that are being offered in Spanish, but I would also encourage people to go and listen into the panels, for example, that are so important, like the pay-to-play panels, and, like, I don't know if you're going to be giving a conference in political commercials.
We'll probably have some political content, yeah.
I think that's so important, because that's such a big part of the commercial world right now. So, and I think Hispanic talent have a lot to look forward to.
Well, it's important. I actually literally just today directed a talent through bilingual political demo. And, with varying degrees of her authentic accent, and then also one spot completely in Spanish and some that were a little Spanglish. And it's such an important part of the market, because, again, the Latin American population in the United States has been exploding for years and will continue to. And it's such a big part of our culture. We need to have that representation. And so I think it's important for the conference to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I encourage people to sign up, and I'm going to have links to that in the show notes for sure. Now I wanted to ask you something else. I mean, you are, of course, you're a coach and you're a mentor to a lot of people, but who is your mentor?
That's a good question. In terms of did I, learn from anybody or study with anybody, I didn't. I grew up, I learned this from getting into the radio business and some level of trial and error when I was younger. But if there's somebody in the industry that I would describe as someone I look up to and someone who I like to emulate in terms of the way that I carry myself and the way that I approach the industry, I don't think there's anybody classier in the business than Joe Cipriano. And he's become a very, very good friend of mine over the years. He's kind of like the older brother I never had in a lot of ways. And so if I've got a mentor, I'm not sure that's the right word, but certainly someone that I look up to and I aspire to model the same engagement and behavior and class that he's demonstrated over the years. And I think he's a good role model for anybody getting into the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you were, you commented a little bit about it, that he would have gone into law school. Is that the route you would have gone if VO hadn't hypnotized you?
Probably, yeah. Probably. I think considering the kinds of people you have to deal with in that profession, and, just regardless of what side of the courtroom you're on, that probably a good choice to play on the microphone.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's so much acting as well, like in a courtroom and all that. It's
a little bit, right? It's still a show at the end of the day.
It is. So it's either in front of the microphone or in a courtroom, but it's still acting. Yeah, but we are so glad, and I think I speak for most of the voiceover community to say we are so glad you are in the voiceover industry.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Definitely. I want to mention something that I saw on your website, which I thought I kind of chuckled at first, but then I thought, no, this is so real. So you have this. I'm going to read it off of here. So there's a little sign that says verified human.
That's nice.
And then that note that says, J. Michael Collins guarantees that all work is authentic and will never be created by a voice clone or AI model. And actually, it's so important to make that distinction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's funny because we don't really know where all this is going. My suspicion is that it's going to fairly substantially impact the very low end of the business, and will probably have a little impact towards the middle end, and not much impact on the high end. But one thing that I have kind of made a habit of over my career, and it's typically worked out well for me, we'll see if it continues to, is swimming against the stream a little bit, or going against the herd a little bit. And there are a lot of people right now who are in a rush to go out and make AI models. And I still haven't quite seen a use case for how voice actors are going to really monetize this in any meaningful way. And if I do, you might change my mind. But for the moment, one thing I do see as something we're going to run into in a few years, and the people who are out creating voice models probably want to think about this right now, and I don't think enough people are, and that is that I believe, particularly when it comes to things that involve very, very proprietary information, sensitive information, even classified information. I do a lot of government work, and that kind of stuff comes with very, very serious overtones and privacy requirements and non-disclosures and whatever else. But even in the corporate world, I think you're going to see develop over the next few years a market for talent who can certify that they have never lent themselves to a voice model, because there are going to be companies and governments and other organizations that are concerned that if they hire a talent who has a voice clone out there, that their very sensitive content could be reproduced by a competitor or an enemy or whatever it may be, and reproduced in a false manner or in a manner that may be detrimental to company security, national security, who knows? There's going to be a market for this, for people who can certify they've never gone the voice clone route. And I've decided for the moment that I'm going to be one of those people who chooses not to have my voice synthesized. Now, again, show me how I can make 5 figures a month doing a voice clone. We'll talk. But anything less than that, I fail to see the advantage for an individual voice talent compared to the potential income lost over time.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that there are companies that you can license that to, but that has to be done in a contract, and that has to be so well laid out for you to say, finally, yes, I'm going to record X amount of prompts for you, sell them to you, but this is how much you're going to pay me in royalties, and every time you use my voice. I mean, not many companies are going to be willing to say, well, no, because I have more people that I can do this for, and they charge half of what you do or whatever.
Well, it also doesn't prevent, a defense contractor, for instance, from saying, well, look, it's great that you've protected yourself by creating licenses and making sure they can't use it in a manner that you don't authorize, but because it exists, we're not going to work with you. Right?
Exactly.
And nobody's thinking about that right now. Nobody's thinking about how important so many of these companies take their security, that this could be looked at as a liability. I think we need to think more about that.
I think you're right. That's definitely something that has to be talked about and considered. And I think more people, more voice actors should say that up front, and maybe also have a little disclaimer thing there on their website,
verified human, right? So
verified
if you prick
human.
me, do I not bleed?
For sure. My goodness.
Before we go on with the interview, I want to tell you about Squadcast, the platform that I'm using to record most of the interviews for this podcast. Squadcast has excellent sound quality. And the best thing is that your guests can join the session from a computer or their mobile device from anywhere in the world. All they need is a stable internet connection. Find the link in the show notes and try Squadcast free for 7 days, and then you can decide which plan best fits your needs, either audio only or the video option. Squadcast has many advantages, like the possibility of having up to 9 people in the session, for example, in a virtual meeting. And you can download your mixed and mastered audio files with Dolby sound quality. Try it out at squadcast.fm/ref=La Pizarra. This link is in the show notes.
Okay, so you, of course, work with several agents and you have managers and you're also on pay-to-plays. And how do you find the time to be everywhere, to do everything? I mean, and I want the name of your vitamin supplement.
Lobster.
I don't mind that.
It used to be gin, but after we had a kid, we had to change. But of course, my great saying is sleep is for the dead. No, look, I mean, I'm a big believer in work hard, play hard. Today I'm in the middle of my week. It's a Tuesday, which means I'm pulling, 14, 15 hours today. And that's pretty common for the middle of my week. 16 is not unheard of. 18 is not completely unheard of. But look, I get a lot done in a condensed period, usually during the work week, and people see me on social media. I take a lot of little 3-day weekends and go play in places, and we take our time off too, and we have fun. But I think the biggest thing is having a disciplined, consistent routine and schedule, and sticking to it, and not bailing and quitting when things get tough and when you're tired, and understanding also when to walk away when you're completely out of gas, because we do have to give ourselves some relief. But
For sure.
I think to some degree routine is the key, because I do have a lot on my plate. I'm making a lot of decisions relatively quickly on a daily basis, doing a lot of auditions on a daily basis, doing a lot of recording on a daily basis, and and running numerous other VO adjacent businesses at the same time. But part of it's also the fact that I've got a tremendous team around me. I've got number one, the most wonderful wife on the face of the earth, who supports me in everything I do and who has become more integrated in our business over the years. And I've got, what we jokingly refer to now as the Lob Mob, which is my collected group of about a dozen or so knuckleheads who support our businesses in various ways. And people like Bridget Reel and Jen Henry and Kayla Jackson and Lynn Norris and Jessica Matheson, who's Anna's personal assistant, and AJ McKay, and so many more. So without them, obviously, it wouldn't be possible to function at the level that we do. But I think, for an individual voice actor, have your days be consistently scheduled in a manner that works for you. And that's different for everybody. If that means 6 hours, 6 days a week, great. If it means 14 hours, 3 days a week, and then you need some time to decompress, great. Whatever works for you. But, work hard, play hard is kind of my philosophy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that for a lot of people, it's hard because you're working from home to really establish your own times, your own schedule. It helps, like if you have kids, like for me at the beginning, that's the thing, make sure they get to school on time, and then just do most of what I can in the morning, and then afterwards when they, I pick them up. But now they're all in college, and so I have more. But then I tend to go on the too much, like, now I have all this time to work on my business. There you go. And then sometimes you forget to also set an end time to the day, which is also good. It's also important. I mean, we need our rest.
And also treat it like a job. I mean, look, there's a reason I'm in a white Brooks Brothers button-down business shirt and, slacks and whatever else. I dress for work every day. I don't, put on my PJs and come and try to be voiceover guy who doesn't have to show up to a real job. This is a real job, so I dress now. I mean, does that work for everybody? I don't know, but it works for me, and it reminds me that I'm in the office. This is my office, and when I'm in here, I'm at work.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that plays a big part in your mindset. If you get ready for work, for women, you comb your hair, you put your makeup on, whatever, and you your commute is 3 steps into, from your bedroom to your studio, for example. But that's it. I mean, you're there, you close the door, that's your workspace, and you treat it as such. And that's the only way to get things done. Otherwise, it's just so hard to create that schedule and to put yourself into those working hours and producing all of that,
Now, it's not just women, by the way. This face took hours to put on, so give me some credit here.
Little touch here, little touch there.
I'm not sure it worked, but
Oh my goodness, don't we do so much? Beauty hurts, and then, right? We have to do a lot for it. But okay, let's talk now a little bit about like the luxurious side of VO. So your much coveted EuroVO retreats, which I still have to get on. And by the way, can I get into your waiting list? I mean, because it's, of course, as soon as you start talking about it, it fills up, and it's within quick, yeah. hours. So, but I think, okay, tell me the difference between going to a conference and paying for the X sessions, for example, and then going to the EuroVO retreat.
Well, it's a pretty dramatic difference. I mean, in the sense that you are essentially, it's full immersion, okay? And conferences are fantastic because you come and you get a little bit from everybody, and you learn, you accumulate a lot of knowledge over the week, you make a lot of contacts, you have fun. And what I mean, and I probably shouldn't put something over the content at conferences, but for me, what I've always thought was the biggest draw to conferences is it's where you find your tribe. It's where you find, your group of friends, and you hang out and you make connections, and we hire each other all the time. So sometimes you're better. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do better when you go to a conference finding a group of friends that you have lunch with than you do hanging out with some casting director who's going to forget you in 15 minutes, right? Because those friends are people who will send you work in the future, and you can reciprocate and send them work in the future. But the retreats, the biggest difference is it's small group. When we do our smaller venues like Barcelona, we're limiting that one to 10 people now. And we bring in 6 or 8 teachers who are some of the best in the business, and they get to live with them for a week. I mean, that is like Big Brother VO, that particular venue. And, they come in and they basically hang out in this really cool big house overlooking the Mediterranean and these beautiful white sand beaches for a week. And they form little families, and they just get to know each other. And, what happened, we never advertise, oh, you're going to get signed by an agent or a manager, or you're going to book work with this casting director or anything like that. But people do take people under their wing. People develop relationships and they get to know each other, and things can develop from that over time as long as you treat it like a respectful business thing that it should be, and treat people like human beings. But it's small group. The sessions are 2.5 hours at a time, all of them. They repeat during the week, which means that oftentimes by the time you get to the third time the presenter's doing their session, even the really big name people, we've had Mary Lynn Wisner have 2 people for 2.5 hours. We've had Pat Brady have 2 people for 2.5 hours. At this most recent one, I think Trish Ryan from DPN had one where she had like 4 people for 2.5 hours, right? So you get the chance to really, really dig in with these people in a way that number one, you could do a private with them. You could do a one-on-one. You could do a couple of one-on-ones. But if it's over Zoom, if it's, a mile away or a million miles away, it's not quite the same experience as being in the room and then going downstairs and having a glass of wine with them afterwards and talking about something other than shop. So it's an experience, and we try to wine and dine people and make them think about nothing for that with no worries for that week except for voiceover and the ability to hang out with some of the coolest people in the industry and get to learn things to a depth that might not be available elsewhere. And I think that's the draw. And, we genuinely aren't making money on these things. I think part of the reason that they become popular is people see that we put back pretty much everything we take into these. This has never been about making a profit. There's some we clear a little bit on. Really, I always say if I can clear what I lose in a week of voiceover, we're happy with that. They've almost become for us, even though it's work, and it's often a lot of work for Anna and a little less work for me because I'm hosting and she's doing all the stuff behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, it's it's become almost like a week-long getaway for us with some of the people we love most in the business. And then we make new friends, and we have these new families. The Switzerland group, the WhatsApp group from Switzerland is still going now. And that retreat ended, November? That retreat ended 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, something like that. And we have some of the Facebook groups that are still going 2, 3, 4 years later. So they're fun. They're fun. And look, I get that, I did an interview with Paul Strickwarder recently where we talked about, the accessibility of these. And obviously it's a price point that not everybody in the industry is going to be able to attain, but they're not really designed. When we have newcomers come to these, they're pretty advanced newcomers. They're people who are kind of all in on it, and for the most part, the people who are coming are people who are already fairly well into a professional voiceover career. A lot of 5-figure earners. We do even have people coming in now as attendees who are in the low to mid 6 figures coming in to attend. So there's a price point associated with it, but the type of talent who is really really meant for are the people who are looking to go from doing okay in the industry to elevating to the next level. And that's what it's really all about. It's not for somebody who, just discovered voiceover and, and wants to get their feet wet. That's, please don't come spend that kind of, we probably wouldn't let you anyway, but please don't spend that kind of money on something like, go to VO Atlanta, go to One Voice, go to the conferences that are out there. But the retreats are, they're a labor of love.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it certainly has all of the elements that a lot of people that have been in the business for a while are looking for, because you want to specialize on certain things and then get more of what you're doing and in a very nice way, and you get away and doing it in a different setting. It's very inviting. So
I want to add one other thing, if you don't mind, which is that
sure.
One of the things I always say at the beginning of the retreats to the people who are attending, and I'll give you a little glimpse behind the curtain here, is that I ask them to look around and to look at the venue that we're in, which is often fairly spectacular, and understand that there's so much promotion of mediocrity and grind and, be happy with less in the voiceover industry today. And what I want to demonstrate to people is that that's not the way it has to be. Look around. This can be the life that you have. This can be not a fantasy that you experience once in a lifetime. This can be your everyday. That's attainable in this industry. It doesn't happen for all that many people, okay? But it is attainable in this industry. And I really believe that, when we shoot for the stars, we make it sometimes. Sometimes we land on the moon, but we're still doing pretty well, right? That's what the retreats are all about.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of the time, especially when we're starting out and you see all the prices, the budgets on pay-to-plays, or even what agents are throwing your way and all that, and you're thinking, you start to form yourself like a mindset of how things are. And you're barely breaking even and thinking, well, that's, you have to keep grinding and have to be throwing, 50, 60 auditions a day. And then thinking that, you turn into a little auditioning machine. And then at some point you sort of lose a little bit of that inspiration or that passion that you started in the business with.
Right.
And I think it's important to look at the other side of things and saying, okay, you need to learn how to set your rates. That's always a point of discussion, but I think it's so important to be able to negotiate and to learn what you can ask for and to value yourself. And if you've been putting money into your business and all of a sudden you have a booth and you have better equipment and all of that, and that shows, and your quality and the sound quality shows, then it's okay to look at things in another way and say, okay, I'm going to turn down these things that are not within the budget that I need, and I'm going to put my attention to more of these other things, Right. So what are those opportunities? Where do you think those mostly come from, the ones that are game changers for voice actors?
In terms of an individual job?
In terms of maybe the sources where you can get those from.
Well, I think that, we source work from different places. You brought that up at the beginning of the show. And I think that every pipeline offers different things to a voice actor. I think one of the smartest things we can do is to treat this like an investment portfolio and to diversify and to make sure that we have multiple streams of income within voiceover. I'm a big believer that the people out there preaching, you must choose one thing in voiceover and become a master of it. Well, why can't you be a master of 5 or 6 things, right? I don't believe in being a jack of all trades and a master of none. I want to be a master of as many as I can. And there's some areas I don't play in because they've just never spoken to me as much as some others have, or maybe the pay is not quite what I want. But, I've made a concerted effort over the years to be highly proficient in, the better part of 8 or 10 different genres. And that's helped when some have, during the pandemic, and if you go back to the early days of the pandemic, the people who were getting killed in the industry were the people who were doing anything tied to Hollywood, who were doing, animation, trailer, promo, anything that was just, something tied to on camera, something tied to, in-person production. It was not a good time for about 6 months for those voice actors. If you were doing commercial, surprisingly, I was shocked commercial actually went up during the pandemic, but it did.
Yes, it skyrocketed.
But
yes.
if you were doing E-learning doubled. Medical narration tripled. Corporate narration was strong. If you were in those places, there was more work than there had ever been. And, if you had a broadly diversified career to where, okay, I do a little trailer, I do a little promo, I don't do much animation, but that work, okay, that's gone now. That's great. But here's medical narration going crazy. Here's e-learning going crazy. It's corporate, and we're, thinking at the beginning, are we in the apocalypse? But here are these things that come in and replace the things that go away. So, where do those opportunities come from? I think if people are on pay-to-play sites, it's often about two things. Number one, with commercial, it's volume. I don't really usually do national spots off pay-to-plays because they tend not to pay what they're worth. Okay, so generally speaking, I tend to avoid those because the usage or the pay is usually not what it should be. Regionals are kind of hit and miss. Some are good, some are not. But where I find really good success on pay-to-play sites with commercial is short-run, local, smaller market, automotive, casino and gaming, grocery retail, pharma, that kind of stuff where there's volume and it doesn't run for a long period of time, and it may not pay a lot. I mean, local automotive, $150 to $400 is pretty average for a spot, but if you're the voice of 5 or 6 dealerships, you might be doing 20, 30, 40 spots a month, right? Exactly. Casino and gaming. I picked up Hollywood Casino and Penn Gaming off of Voice 123 back in 2017, actually during our first retreat. That booking on a to-be-defined budget job on Voice 123 has led to about 4,000 commercials in 5 years, okay? Do they pay individually a ton of money? No, they're locals. They're going to run in Mahoning Valley, Pennsylvania for, 2 or 3 weeks, right? But they pay enough, and you X that by 4,000, you're in pretty good shape, right? And I was able to also pass that job on to a colleague of mine, and she's doing well with them now. So, Perfect. That kind of stuff is what's on pay-to-play. On pay-to-play also, it's non-broadcast narration. The one area where you're going to find that does, with some consistency, pay fairly, and you're going to run into your garbage clients just like you will in any other genre, but explainer, corporate, e-learning, medical narration on the online casting sites, those are usually the ones that pay fairly. If you're a union actor, those are the ones that typically are going to be convertible because most of those are going to meet scale or do better because union scale in those genres, if you actually go take a look at it, isn't all that high. So the actual non-union pay-to-play rates for non-broadcast narration are typically considerably higher than SAG-AFTRA cards. So, those are good places to play. Now, if you want the stuff that's going to pay for a car in one session, that's mostly coming through your talent agents and a handful of managers in the business. And so you have to get yourself to an elite level as a performer. You have to have elite demos. You have to have probably a referral from somebody on their roster who they trust. You need to have a decent body of work behind you. It doesn't have to be 10 years worth, but a couple of, reasonably decent brand names, some wins. If you've got something current, that's great. And you have to be persistent and also understand where you fit, and make sure that you target those kinds of applications, effectively. But if you want to book the stuff that, the days of, I always joke that these days, the days of a single job paying for a house, that's kind of over unless you're a celebrity. But the jobs out there that'll pay for a nice automobile for an hour's work, they still exist, and that's the land in which you find them. And, a lot of that top 1% of work, a lot of that is still union. So if that's really what you want to focus your career on, then becoming a union actor at some point might be right for you, particularly if you're LA or New York or Chicago. Those are markets where it can be very effective. But everybody's got a different path and everybody sources things from different places. Ultimately, it's about, like you said, knowing what you're worth, standing up for what you're worth, which doesn't mean there aren't, I think we do get sometimes a little too pitchforks and torches about rates in the industry in the sense that there are times when accepting a rate that is a little low is fine. You got to feed your family, okay? You got to pay your bills. There's a difference between a rate that's a little low and a rate that's abusive. And part of the job we have as talent, and part of the job those of us who teach and those of us who coach have, is to educate ourselves and to educate others about the difference between those things. What's a great rate? What's a good rate? What's an acceptable rate? And when you should absolutely walk away. And, and that's all part of the game. But the cool thing about the voiceover industry in 2022, moving into 2023, is that there is still despite so many people wanting to be a part of this, there's still far more work out there than there is quality talent to do it. And I always tell newer talent, I'm like, look, you're probably not going to get rich doing this, okay? But the bottom line is that there are 200,000 people in North America calling themselves voice actors. Out of those 200,000, 10,000 are making any kind of decent money, and it's 1,000 or 2 booking most of the work. And there's a reason that if you look on voiceover social media and you look at who's popping up with new work all the time and talking about their wins, not bragging, just posting their spots, whatever it might be, it's still kind of like 80% the same people it was 8 or 10 years ago. It hasn't changed. There are newcomers who have come in and done really well, right? But it's still a lot of the same folks, and it tends to be a lot of the same folks, and there's a reason for that. There aren't that many people who are actually that amazing at this job, and if you're one of them, if you can handle the tech, if you've got the performance, if you treat this like a profession, it's still a good place to play.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a difference, and you have to see your career as something that is progressing. And because if you find yourself stalling at some point where you're kind of stuck and you don't know what to do or how to go about those things, I think that's the time to get more coaching, more into it. But then, first of all, really think if that is what you really want, because maybe people have reached a point where they couldn't give more in that area, right? So I think it's that's part of why I think conferences are great to go to, and you get a little bit of everything. You can go to, you can see a little bit of every genre. Maybe it's time to change into another genre, but also about meeting people and talking to all of the ones that are going through the same thing, and we're working on our own most of the time, and so it's good to go out and see how other people are doing, and one of the things I want to say, I mean, I know you have a good work-life balance, but what do you recommend for people who are like too afraid to let go of just 5 more 6 auditions, even though they're super tired and they just have to get them done, but maybe their voice is not at the best,
Right. They'll be there tomorrow. They're more than there have ever been. There's more work than there's ever been in this business. New media, streaming media, there's more work than there's ever been in this business. The pandemic, more work than there's ever been for e-learning, for medical narration. There's still so much more distance stuff going on than there used to be, even though we're coming out of it. It'll be there in the morning. And set boundaries. Look, one of the, because, I split time between Europe and the U.S. And one of the things I've learned over the years in Europe is that you do have to have that balance, and you do have to understand that there are times where you're off the clock, okay? And I don't work weekends. Now, you throw a 5-figure job at me, we'll talk. But if it's less than that, I do not work weekends, period, okay? Not interested. I have to have family time. Understand that there's quitting time whenever that may be for you. One of the reasons I work really, really aggressively, usually 3 days out of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm going 14, 16 hours, is because I only want to work 4 or 6 hours on Monday or Friday, or I may want to take Monday and Friday off, okay, and have a 3-day weekend or a 4-day weekend. So I tend to cram it all into a fairly short burst of high energy. That's how I like to work. But whatever your boundaries are, set your boundaries. And I think the biggest thing I can say is this, and this really speaks to talent who are starting to experience some success. And that can just be, your first couple of dozen jobs or whatever it might be, or it can be this is starting to become real income for you. But there does come a point where when it starts to work, okay, and that's a great thing when it starts to work, but there does come a point where you start to look at your studio as a little ATM machine. And there comes a point when you have to remember that we don't live to work. We work to live, right? And that you're not losing money by not being in your studio. You're gaining the things that you were in your studio for originally. Treat it that way, and you'll probably come out all right on the other end.
Yes, I mean, that is so true. And that's a lot of the things that we say about the European mindset is exactly that. You work to live, not the other way around.
And I think
right?
we're seeing that in the U.S. now. I think there's more of an acknowledgement since the pandemic of the fact that, the constant hustle and grind is soul-sucking in so many ways. And maybe it is necessary at the beginning of your career. I mean, there are I still pull 60, 70 hour weeks sometimes. Okay. It's part of the nature of what solopreneurs do.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, it can't be the only thing. You got to have a life. If you have a family, you've got to pay attention to your family. Otherwise, what are we doing? It's not, You're never voiceover is wonderful, but you're never going to have Elon Musk money. Okay, so if you're trying to get the private jet or the yacht, you're in the wrong business.
You are in the wrong business.
So
yes.
why? What's the point? There comes a point where enough, right? Live your life, enjoy your life, and then come back to the studio when it's time to go to work.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I wanted to see a little bit about what your opinion is on people who are, I have a lot of bilingual listeners for this podcast, and maybe they are living in Latin America or in Spain, or also maybe in the U.S., but they have different levels of accent when they speak English. Are you seeing more of an opening now for commercials that have that non-distinct or non-descriptive accent, So where do you see it more?
I do. It's funny you asked that because I saw one last night or the night before while I was watching football. And it was, I forget the brand now, but it was maybe that means it wasn't the best commercial, but it was a major brand. And it was a female VO, with a vaguely Latin American accent that you couldn't quite put your finger on, right? But it wouldn't have been cast in English that way 20 years ago. And I think it's such a positive evolution now that, again, we start to see that representation in commercials of people who not just look like America, but sound like America. And I do think that that's a growing market. You see it a lot more in political now. That's becoming a much, much more common thing in political because they want representation. What's interesting sometimes is there's counterintuitive casting, which means that sometimes it's the left that's hiring more old white guys and the right that's hiring more minorities and females these days because they want to move that 1% in the other direction, right? But at the end of the day, there are many opportunities in political for accented work, and I'm seeing it more in retail commercials. So I think it is a trend that will continue to occur. I think you'll probably see more of the hybrid, the Spanglish a little bit as well. And it's interesting times. Where the cool thing is that I think there was an instinctive reaction, and it's not just with the Latin American community. I think the BIPOC community obviously is so much more represented now than they used to be. And I think there was an instinctive reaction among some older guard talent going, what is this? Are they going to is this going to cost us work, right? And it's not. What's happening is the pie is simply getting bigger. And now everybody gets a piece. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And what are some of the things that you recommend for people who want to break into the U.S. market that maybe they haven't done yet? Of course, you mentioned pay to place, and certainly then there's an idea for that. But people who maybe think that they shouldn't go and look for agents in U.S. cities, do you think it's good for them and they shouldn't, be or I don't know, undervalue themselves? I mean, they should actually look for those opportunities.
Work with coaches who understand that market, work with demo producers who understand that market, and then make a plan. People think, I'm different, so I won't get signed or I won't get hired. It's exactly the opposite now. I can't tell you how many specs I see. We are looking for something different, right?
Yeah,
if you're something they don't already have 10 of on their roster, your chances of getting signed are so much higher than somebody who looks and sounds like me. Okay? For crying out loud, please get on it because this is your time. This is still as much as we talk about diversity and representation and voiceover for Latin American and BIPOC talent, this is still the ground floor. This is still getting in early. And it may not feel like that, but it still is because there is not as much competition as you might think. Get in now because it is the moment. And if you get a foothold now in the business, you're going to be in 10 years. You're going to be one of the go-tos. You're going to be one of the stars.
For sure. And speaking of that, what type of demo should someone have? Like, let's say a commercial demo, should it represent, commercials or spots or pieces in both languages, or just in English with their own Hispanic accent or wherever their accent is from?
I think it's different for every talent based upon their level of proficiency with English. So if you're highly, highly fluent in English, then, or if it's, one of two mother tongues or something like that, then I think English with an accent and maybe a Spanish phrase or two thrown into the demo is probably the primary one that you want. And you can obviously do a full Spanish demo as well, because there's a very large market for that in the U.S. But I think the one the agents will be most attracted to is the one that is primarily English accented, maybe a couple of Spanish phrases or pieces, or maybe one Spanish spot on the reel. We tend to hesitate a little bit to mix accents on commercial demos these days. In general, what agents will tell you and what a lot of managers will tell you is that they're targeting specific people and specific buyers with specific demos. So they want to hear a lot of range within whatever that thing is. But there's always a little latitude to that. Anybody who ever tells you that there are hard and fast rules with demos and how you market yourself and everything else, look, the rules are meant to be bent a little bit, not necessarily always broken, but there's always a little flexibility. So I think the best thing you can do is work with people who know what they're talking about, who can give you an individual recommendation based on your situation, because it's not a cookie cutter for everybody.
Sure. So it's always like the way to get in with a top-rated agent is always through a recommendation of someone who's already in their roster.
It's very valuable, yeah. And even more so if you can get a recommendation from an ad agency that you've worked with that they trust, somebody who might bring them business or who already does bring them business, that can be even more valuable. It's kind of your pecking order, and I probably shouldn't say this because it sells what we do short, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like ad agency or current or potential client, right? Or production company, current or potential client, followed by talent who books consistently on their roster as a good referral, followed by coach or demo producer down here, right? They love to see that you go to me or Chuck Duran or Uncle Roy or Eric Romanowski or, any number of other Ann Ganguza or any number of other people to get your demo done. That's a mark that you're taking your business seriously.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, we're a little less important to them than somebody who will vouch for you who is already putting money in their pocket or could, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so where can people find you to get information about, of course, the conferences and to learn everything about the demos and all the different genres that you do demos in?
If you butter up a lobster tail and just throw it out somewhere, within 10 or 15 minutes, like a truffle
you will be
hog,
there.
I'm going to be
that is the best way.
It's kind of like the bat signal, But you can, if you're interested in coaching and demo stuff, jmcdemos.com, also jmcvoiceover.com, and best way to get a hold of me is always email. So jmichael@jmcvoiceover.com, and I'm happy to talk to you about those kinds of things and or VO Atlanta or whatever else you want to chat about.
And I also like that you offer that it's like a loyalty or a success levels.
I talk for a living. The Success Club. Yeah, and it's actually the first ever loyalty program for voiceover services. So if you are a client of JMC Demos, or you work with me for coaching, or you come to one of my workshops, or you come to a retreat, or VO Atlanta, or Gravy for the Brain, or Badalgo. If you spend any money with any of us, you accrue points just like a frequent flyer program, and you can gain tiers of status and eventually redeem those points for various free goodies, some of pretty substantial value depending on how many points you've got. So it's basically a frequent flyer program for voiceover services.
And it's free to sign up?
Free to sign up.
Well, there you go. I wish I would have known that before. I have so many points now. I check a lot of those boxes that you just mentioned.
If you've got any receipts from 2022 or 2021, send them to my assistant, Kayla, at jmcvoiceover.com, and she'll set you up.
Good to know. I'm very happy. I will sleep a very happy woman tonight. No, I'm getting all those points in. J. Michael, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me, and hope I didn't ramble too much, but good to see everybody out there.
And you rambled in the good way, and in the way that everyone needs to pay attention to. But I'm going to link to all of what we mentioned today so that people can find you and book their their conferences and everything else and their demos and all that. So, well, thanks again. And, you're going to sign up from here and look at the election results. I know it's
That's
an
right.
important
We've got
day
food
today.
being delivered right now, and we're going to go down and watch that and see see if we all wake up in the same place tomorrow or not.
Yes. Hopefully so. Yeah. Okay. It'll be interesting to know. But other than that, and the good thing is there will always be enough voiceover opportunities for everyone, no matter
That's
what
right.
happens. Yeah.
You,
Absolutely.
Nikki.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on La Pizarra. Want to listen to more episodes? Visit lapizarrapodcast.com or nickymondolini.com/La Pizarra, where you can sign up for our newsletter and get exclusive previews of future episodes, as well as resources for your creative business. Tune in next week for another interesting interview.